You've asked yourself the question before. Probably more than once. Usually late at night, or early on a Sunday when the week hasn't started yet and there's nothing to distract you from it. What am I actually doing with my life? Not in a dramatic way. Just a quiet, persistent itch underneath the routine. You go to work, you come home, you scroll, you sleep, and somewhere in that loop a feeling sits that you can't quite name. Not sadness exactly. Closer to drift. Like you're moving but not arriving anywhere. Meanwhile, on a small island in southern Japan, there's a place called Ajimai. The average person there lives past 90. Many keep working, gardening, teaching, fishing, well into their hundreds. And when researchers go and ask them why, the answer almost never has anything to do with diet or genetics. It has to do with a word. A word that doesn't translate cleanly into English, but once you understand it, you start to see exactly where your own life has stopped making sense. The word is Ikigai. By the end of this video, you'll understand what Ikigai actually is, why most of the Western explanation of it is incomplete, and 4 specific shifts you can make starting this week to stop drifting and start living with direction. Stay until the end, because the last part is the one almost nobody talks about, and it's probably the actual reason you feel lost in the first place. Let's start with what Ikigai is not. You've probably seen the diagram. 4 overlapping circles. What you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, with Ikigai sitting neatly in the middle where they intersect. It's a tidy image. It's also, according to the people who actually study this in Japan, mostly a Western invention. The diagram was never used in Okinawa, where Ikigai as a lived concept actually comes from. It was created decades later by a marketing consultant trying to make the idea legible to a business audience. That doesn't mean the diagram is useless. It just means it answers the wrong question. It asks what should my purpose be, as if purpose is a destination you calculate your way toward. The actual Japanese concept asks something much smaller and much more useful. What makes getting up this morning worth it? Ikigai, broken down, comes from iki, meaning life, and gai, meaning value or worth. Together it roughly means a reason for being. But the people of Ajimai don't experience it as a grand, singular calling. They experience it as something closer to a rhythm. A reason to put your feet on the floor that doesn't require justification, doesn't require it to be impressive, doesn't require anyone else's approval. For an 80-year-old woman in Ajimai, Ikigai might be tending a small vegetable patch every morning before the heat sets in. For a 90-year-old man, it might be the 2 hours he spends each day repairing nets for the younger fishermen, even though he hasn't gone out on a boat himself in 15 years. Neither of them would call this their life's purpose. They'd just shrug and say it's what they do. And that shrug is the entire point. This is the first shift, and it's going to feel almost too small to matter. Stop looking for the big purpose. Start noticing the small reasons. Most people in modern life have been trained to think of purpose as a single, identifiable thing, a career, a calling, a mission statement you could put on a wall. So when nothing that grand presents itself, the feeling that follows isn't peace, it's failure. You start to believe something is missing in you, when really the framework you were handed was the thing that was broken. Researchers studying the longest-lived communities on Earth, including Ajimai, found something consistent across all of them. It wasn't one big purpose that kept people going. It was a dense web of small, repeated reasons. A person to check in on, a plant to water, a skill to keep sharp, a small task that only they could do in exactly the way they did it. None of these things would survive being written on a resume. All of them, together, were enough. If you've been waiting to discover your one true purpose before you feel like your life means something, that wait might be the very thing keeping you stuck. The second shift addresses why. Ikigai isn't found by searching. It's built by doing. This is the part most explanations skip entirely. The instinct in a results-driven culture is to think your way into purpose, journal about it, take a quiz, sit with a coffee and try to reason your way to clarity. But in Okinawan tradition, Ikigai isn't something you arrive at through reflection. It's something that reveals itself through repetition. You start doing a small thing. You keep doing it. And somewhere in the doing, not the deciding, the sense of this matters shows up on its own. A researcher who spent years interviewing centenarians in Ajimai noted that almost none of them could articulate their Ikigai in a single sentence when asked directly. But when asked to describe a normal day, it came pouring out without effort, the garden, the grandchild, the morning walk to check on a neighbor. Their reason for being wasn't a concept they held in their head. It was something they were already doing, every day, without needing to call it anything. If you're sitting at home trying to think your way into a sense of meaning, try the opposite. Pick one small, repeatable action this week, something modest, something only loosely related to a big purpose, and just do it daily. Don't wait for it to feel significant first. The significance tends to arrive after the habit, not before it. The third shift is about who you're doing any of this for, and it's the one most people get quietly backwards. In the Western framing, purpose is often treated as something deeply personal, almost solitary. Find yourself. Follow your own path. But in the communities where Ikigai is most alive, the sense of reason for being is rarely private. It's relational. It exists in the space between you and other people, the person who's counting on you, the role only you fill, the small contribution that would be missed if you stopped. This is part of why isolation is so corrosive to a sense of meaning, even when nothing else in someone's life has changed. A person can have hobbies, money, free time, and still feel hollow if there's no one whose day is shaped by their presence. Ajimai's social structure has a built-in answer to this. Small, lifelong friend groups called moai, originally formed for financial support, that evolve over decades into a near-permanent circle of mutual obligation. You show up because they're expecting you. They show up because you are. You don't need a moai exactly, but you do need at least one relationship, one small group, one regular commitment where your presence is genuinely expected and would be noticed in its absence. That expectation is doing more for your sense of purpose than any amount of solo reflection ever will. And now, the fourth shift, the one that ties the first three together and quietly explains why so many people feel lost despite having, on paper, a perfectly full life. Ikigai isn't about scale. It's about attention. Modern life trains you to evaluate everything by size. Bigger job title, bigger salary, bigger following, bigger impact. So even when you're doing something meaningful, a small part of your mind is constantly asking whether it's meaningful enough, whether it counts, whether anyone would be impressed by it. And that quiet comparison is enough to drain the feeling out of almost anything. The people who live by Ikigai don't ask whether their reason for being is impressive. The garden isn't going to go viral. Repairing fishing nets isn't going to make anyone famous. And that's exactly why it works. There's no gap between the size of the action and the size of the meaning attached to it, because the meaning was never measured against an external scale in the first place. The value was always internal, always immediate, always today. This is why someone can retire from a high-status career, lose the title, the salary, the recognition, and feel a sudden, disorienting emptiness, even though their life looks unchanged from the outside. The purpose was borrowed from the scale of the role. Once the role disappeared, there was nothing underneath it that had been getting daily attention on its own. So here's what putting these four shifts together actually looks like, not as a program, not as something to optimize, but as a quiet rebuilding. You stop waiting for one grand purpose, and you start noticing the small reasons already sitting in your week. You stop trying to think your way into meaning, and you pick one modest action to repeat until the meaning shows up on its own. You stop treating purpose as something private, and you find the one relationship or commitment where your presence is actually expected. And you stop measuring your reasons for being against anyone else's scale, because the people who feel least lost are usually the ones who stopped asking whether their garden was impressive enough to count. In Ajimai, nobody wakes up asking what their purpose is. They wake up, and there's tea to make, a path to walk, someone to check on. The question never gets asked because it never needs to be. The answer is already built into the morning. So before you go, I want you to actually sit with this, not just scroll past it. What is the one small, repeatable thing in your week that already gives you a quiet reason to get up? And if you can't think of one, which of the four shifts is most missing? Is it that you're waiting for something too big, thinking instead of doing it alone, or quietly measuring it against a scale that was never the point? Drop it in the comments. Not to compare answers, just to name it, because naming it tends to be where the drifting actually starts to stop. If this gave you a different way to think about your own days, send it to someone who's been feeling a little lost lately. They might not need a bigger purpose. They might just need permission to take their small one seriously. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you in the next one. This content is for educational and informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional guidance.